Okay, and we are back. I am so excited today. I have such a special guest with us today. We have Kyle Goodknight, podcaster, business strategist. Kyle has dedicated over 26 years to serving as a paramedic, demonstrating an unwavering commitment to aiding others in high stress emergencies. Kyle successfully transitioned his expertise into the podcasting world with a background as a seasoned voiceover artist and producer. Wow, jack of all trades. Kyle is the creative force behind two inspiring podcasts, Ignition Path and Elevate Podcast, celebrated for their engaging content. So, without further ado, let's bring Kyle on. Kyle, I'm so excited to have you. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Christina. I appreciate it. So,
Absolutely, absolutely. So, we all know that you're a jack of all trades.
well,
Can you tell?
That's why I'm on your show because you specialize in ADHD, and a lot of ADHDers have a lot of irons in the fire.
Yes, that's so, so true. Very, very
So,
true. So tell us, Kyle, how did you discover you had ADHD? Do you remember that moment?
yeah, well, okay, so let me start from because I'm 52, so they didn't have the diagnosis of what do they call it when you're in school and you get the plan. They didn't
Right.
have that. Now, what they did have is I was very lucky when I was in first grade. Mom and dad knew that there was an issue with my learning, and they were getting ready to move to a suburb of Columbus, Ohio, called Westerville. And Westerville at the time was a pioneer in the LD community, learning
Wow.
disability community. So
Mm-hmm.
they moved me to a school district that had a whole different program for LD. Now it was only at one elementary school, and then I don't know how robust it was at the time for the middle schools and high schools, but by the time I got to the middle schools and high schools, it was a robust program. So there was one school at the time that dealt with the ADHD kids that today would have been labeled, what is it that they label them? The 529, not
Oh, the
529, that's the college.
504 plan or the
504,
IEP?
but yeah, IEP,
Yeah.
IEP, IEP.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, my kids never were IEP, even with my son being diagnosed when he was 8 with a mild side of the ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
So we never dealt with an IEP. We just restructured his life. We restructured his routine, and that's what
Right,
we
right.
found was good. But so flashback to the 70s and 80s.
Mm-hmm.
By the time I got into high school was 86. So you're looking at late 70s, or, well, so I was born in 72. So by the time I was 5, it was 77. So 77, 78, that's when we moved to Westerville in 78. And they
Right.
only put the LD kids in one school called Mark Twain. No, Mark Twain was not in my neighborhood. That was not the school that people get. So I used to have to, me and another boy in my neighborhood used to have who was a triplet, by the way. So that was different. So he had a learning disability, but his brothers did not. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't,
Wow.
we've never, of course we were labeled stupid and all that crap. And we're not stupid. I mean, period.
No.
I'm a paramedic. I'm a respiratory therapist. I save lives for a living. I've started and maintained multiple businesses. I'm not stupid. I learned differently. And back then they didn't know what to do with the people that learn differently. Now they have STEM, and they have the IEP that realize and focus on the people that learn and on the kids that learn differently. So back then we were just established at one elementary school.
Right.
Well, at that elementary school, we would meet in homeroom, and then we
Mm-hmm.
would go to a separate teacher who would teach each student in that room. I think there was 4 to 6 of us at any given time in that room.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a different room of the building. And I mean, one time it was literally right off of my homeroom. So I just like stood up and went into a different room while other kids did stuff. I still went to lunch. I still went to recess. I did all the normal stuff, PE, all the normal
Mm-hmm.
stuff. Sometimes like, I would blend back into the class if my tutor, because that's kind of what it was. It was an LD tutor, and
Mm-hmm.
those women, they were all women for me back then. All the different LD tutors that I had through the years were very paramount in my ability to teach me how to learn, teach me how
Mm-hmm.
to take tests, do the strategies. I used to have to spell my spelling words in sand because of the touch and the repetition was a connection to the brain. Now, it didn't hold for me. I'm still a horrible speller, thank God for but I'm a phonetic speller. I did
Yeah.
that all those rules didn't make sense to me. But I'm very good at math. I'm very good at science. I'm very good at practical stuff when it comes to college stuff. When it comes to grammar and spelling, yeah, that wasn't my forte. As some people, my wife doesn't do math at all. Like
Right.
when I start talking about quarters and halves, she's like, "Wait, what?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, or percentages." It's like, wait a minute. So it's where I can decipher that in my head and I can see it and I see the answer and it's done, right?
Right.
So it's just a different. I learned differently. By the time I got into junior high and for sure high school, I
Mm-hmm.
was reintegrated back into all the normal classes in junior high. I just would go for my study hall, I would go to a tutor. Same thing with high
Gotcha.
school. In my study hall, I would go to a tutor. So I was within, but of course, back then there was, ridiculous amounts of bullying and you're stupid. And
Yes.
by the time I got into high school and people started seeing that I was kicking ass on grades and
Right.
getting A's and B's and never failing and having, the special sometimes I had to have extra time because it was one of those things where, I can read. I'm a voiceover actor, so obvious I can read. But to me, when it comes to reading comprehension, I'm slow. I was slower at it. So,
Mm-hmm.
at the time, and it was one of those things where by the time I got into high school, I would have the people that were picking on me back in the elementary days. Hey, Kyle, can you help us study? So yeah. Or I know, how did you get such a good grade? And I've also got this weird superpower where I don't. I even in college, my buddies were like, "So, how many days you've been studying for this midterm?" I'm like, "What do you mean days? We're studying. We're having a study session now." And they're like, "Well, but the test is tomorrow morning." I'm like, "Yeah, so I'm studying now." And they're like, "I've been studying for a week, Kyle." And I'm like, "Okay, I'm studying now. I mean, whatever." And I would get a
Right.
better grade than them because I knew how to take tests. I was trained throughout those years of all that stuff. I was trained on how I learned, how I retain information, how to pick out what the question means. Like I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I went. It was there was an ungodly amount of time spent on how to decipher a question and stuff like that. So
Wow.
so I wasn't diagnosed. Now, mind you, I did some of the I don't know what kind of testing they were. They're the ones where you have to put blocks together. I don't think they're an IQ test where they have the flip charts. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
Those
I know
old
exactly.
tests. And
Yeah.
they weren't ink, they weren't like ink interpretations, not that. That's
Mm-hmm. Right.
that's
The
but it was
flip
like
chart.
it was
Mm-hmm.
a flip chart with different things and shapes and how can you take these shapes on the table and look at this picture and put them together. I was like boop, 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 and I could do that stuff. So I
Right.
remember taking those all the way into college. I mean, I remember my freshman year of college taking my last one. I don't remember what those were called. That'd be a good thing to look up and find out what that actual was called, and then go back and see what that was trying to decipher, and if any part of that was part of the ADHD, arc as they got into the late 80s and early 90s and 2000s.
Right.
So, but yeah, so basically, so I never was told, and I've never heard the word ADHD. Sorry, I'm trying to get back to your same question, but I never
Oh
heard the
yeah.
word ADHD when I was
Mm-hmm.
in elementary, middle, high school. Not at all. Not even in
Mm-hmm.
college did I ever know what that term meant. It wasn't until much later when I started having a family and kids that the word ADHD came about, and it would register as something that could maybe have been the reason why I had a learning disability. Um,
Gotcha.
so we're sitting there, and the day that I felt that, because I'm self-diagnosed, I'm not truly diagnosed because I'm an
Mm-hmm.
adult ADHDer,
Right.
but I'm sitting there when we're getting my son through the process with the physicians and the tests and the doctors that do all the ADHD testing. And he got done with this, whatever, 3 or 4 week, process that it goes through. Once a week, he goes and does all the stuff. And he finally gave his final report to my wife and I. And he's sitting there talking to us about Carter and telling us all the stuff that puts him in the ADHD category. And I'll never forget it because my wife and I were sitting there. We're like, and she's pointing at me, and I'm pointing. I'm like, so that's when I
That's
was like, so
me.
I was kind of like sub-diagnosed because of my son. So that's when it was
Right.
okay. Well, but then once that happened, wow, things started making sense. Things started making sense about stuff that you know, patterns and habits and learning and why I was excelling in certain parts and not excelling in certain parts. all that stuff. And I'm an
Right.
extrovert as it is, so my ADHD kind of gets hide in my extrovertism, if that's even a
Mm-hmm.
word. I use it all the time. I think it should be a word. So
Yes,
so it's one of those
yes.
things where I don't, and I know that you have a lot of questions, but I'm a firm
Yeah.
believer that my ADHD is not a hindrance. It was un it wasn't even around when I was in school. So I was lucky enough to have parents that saw that there was something that needed to be done with me and put me into a school system that had something in the beginning. I'd like to go through the history of what how ADHD and the 50 and the plans,
Right.
the IEPs developed through Westerville, because they were doing stuff like IEP stuff way before the word IEP.
Wow, wow. Thank you for that.
Sorry, that's pretty winded, but yes.
No, no, no. That was
This is
amazing. I love how you brought up, I'm not stupid because there's such a misconception around ADHD. ADHD has absolutely nothing to do with intelligence. I mean,
right.
no.
100%. Yeah.
I'm self-diagnosed as well, and I don't say that lightly. I know a lot of people like, oh, I have ADHD. No, I was a teacher and a counselor, and I served kids with ADHD, and I identify with them. And on
Right.
my report cards, I was in elementary school in the 90s. And on my report card, it would say, that I was more, uh, I want about my social life. I was a social butterfly, and that was just like I was always talking and worried about like talking to people rather than the task on hand. So, but yeah, we didn't, ADHD was not a thing at all, even in the
Even in the 90s.
90s.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Because I was,
Not at all. So it
yeah,
wasn't until I
for
was
elementary. Yeah.
right. Um, so I love how you brought that piece up. And I love how you already brought up, because that was one of my questions, what I was going to get to about how ADHD is more of a superpower. And I'm firmly, firmly believe I'm on a mission to really, really um, tell the world that this is not, I don't believe ADHD is, I know it's a neurological condition. It's real, it's science. I believe that. But I don't really believe it's a disability. I really believe that people with ADHD have amazing superpowers. And I remember in our conversation on your podcast, Kyle, when you were telling me about how, in your work as a first responder and how it's like someone's in cardiac arrest and it doesn't even phase you. You're just like, whatever. I mean, that's a superpower, like to be able to remain calm in a
Well,
situation
and
like
and
that.
here and real quick, when it comes to, we've found there is a increased undiagnosed ADHD world in the first responder world, because it makes a lot
Right.
of sense. Because
Mm-hmm.
what is ADHD? We thrive in the uncontrollable. And
Right.
like when we feel that the situation is uncontrollable or out of control, we find we find the answers because we see everything so differently. Take my son
Right.
for example. Well, the first responder world, that's all. I mean, it's all about the rush. You know what I mean? The ADHD is
Yes.
all about the rush. And when I worked in the
Mm-hmm.
hospital in a level one trauma center, I've worked in three different level one trauma centers and many ICUs, critical care, big, as sick as you can think. I've worked on them right in the hospital setting as a respiratory therapist. And there was, you get a trauma that comes in, there is this rush and it keeps you up. And like there was times when I come home from work and I'd be so high, not
Mm-hmm.
from drugs or anything like that. I would be
Right.
on such a natural adrenaline high that
Yes.
I wouldn't be able to go to sleep after a 12-hour shift, getting off at 7 or 8 o'clock at night.
I
Let
can
alone if I worked
imagine.
when I did my 3 to 11 shifts. I like might as well just be a night shift. I work 3 to 11. I come home, I can't calm down for 5 hours. Because
Right.
it's like you're just like, man, that was so cool. Like, oh my god, and we did this and we did that, and I did this and I did that, and all that. So one of the things when it comes to one of the times when I realized that that really benefits the first responder world, that making sense of chaos, to bring it to a non first responder world. My son, who is was diagnosed low level, no meds. We were given the choice to have meds for him, but we chose not to. We did it
Mhm.
through diet, and everybody, I'm telling you right now, diet is huge. And get
Yes.
get the dyes out of your diet as fast as you can. We would be
Yes.
able. My son would come home from school and be like, what did you have to eat today that had red dye in it? And he'd be like, nothing. I'm like, all right, tell me about your day. Blah, 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 blah. Oh, we had a party for Johnny's birthday. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, what color was the cupcakes? Oh, they were Buckeye cupcakes. Ohio State Buckeyes are red and white, right?
Right,
So
right.
or scarlet and gray. Sorry, but on the icing, it's
Yes.
red and white.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of those things. So I'm like, you had red icing, and he's like, oh yeah, I guess I did. And I'm like, and I could tell, we could tell, but
Oh yeah.
once you get your child off of dyes, and then they have a dye, you can tell the difference, and it's huge, and that's also something that science and proven,
Exactly.
amongst other things with diet, but
Yes.
he was at work one day to get back to my original point.
Mm-hmm.
He's in media, right? He's in media productions for sports. And the first time he got a job for replay, it was with the Toledo Mud Hens up at his close to his school, Bowling Green, Ohio. And he went to Bowling Green at the time. And he calls us up after shift. And he had just gotten the job the day before because somebody said, "Hey, Carter knows how to do that stuff." And so he came in. They're like, "Hey, do you know how to do this program?" He's like, "Yep." And then he called us up and he's like, "Dad," he goes, "I was in heaven." I'm like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "There was 10 TVs on a wall in front of me, and I got to decipher what good went on, and it was it it was easy. It was I knew what to do. There wasn't
Wow.
like I
Mm-hmm.
took all that information overload, and I made sense of it. And I was like, wow, that's cool. You're using your
Yes.
superpower now. So
Exactly.
yeah, so that's what that's the beauty of having ADHD. Sometimes I'm like, when people ask me how I can get so much done in so little time, I'm like, because you don't have ADHD and I do.
Ex- Exactly. We have those Ferrari brains, right?
That's it. Yeah. Like the podcast you came on, I remember I made the
Yes.
logo look like a Ferrari engine.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. And yeah, I love how you brought that up because us with ADHD, we're oftentimes seeking stimulation.
Hmm.
Sometimes we can be overstimulated, but a lot of times we're seeking stimulation. So it makes so much sense for you to be able to just like remain calm in such a crisis. Now, are there
Yeah.
times, Kyle, where you ever get overstimulated?
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
and those are times when because I'm so outgoing too,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes I'm so outgoing. People that don't know me or people that first meet me, they think I'm cocky, and I'm like, I'm not cocky. I'm just confident. There's a difference.
Yeah,
I'm not. I'm
no.
humble. I'm very, and that's something that I've learned more about being humble and understanding and not be the one because I'm always the one that wants to finish everybody's sentences too, and I've had to train myself not to do that because my brain works so fast. I'm already answering the question in the
Right,
middle of my
right.
discussion, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
they're in
Me
their middle
too.
of yeah, and it's one of those things like the emotional intelligence that I have to know and the work that I've done for emotional intelligence, which is another huge thing that all ADHDers need to dive deep into is emotional intelligence. It will help a lot.
Yes.
Um, that emotional intelligence training that I've done for myself over the last 10 or 15 years. So when I was early marriage, I didn't know anything about emotional intelligence, and it hurt. I mean, I almost got divorced a couple of times because of not being emotionally intelligent and connected and just thinking off in my own little world. But overstimulus sometimes when it does happen, people because I'm so outgoing, people say, "Oh, are you okay? Is everything all right? Are you upset with
Mm-hmm.
me?" And I'm like, "No, I'm just processing. It's just my time to be. I feel like everybody has to regenerate. I
Yes.
may have been up for I may have had two shifts in a row on the medic, and we had crazy runs. I remember one day I got switched to another station just recently, and we had a car flip over, we had a miscarriage, we had a cardiac arrest, and we had another hit and run kind of accident. I know that was only four runs, but those runs, because they were so intense and everything
Wow.
was so intense for every single one of those, it was like, and then that was a second day of a shift where I already had a couple of runs the day before that were pretty mundane and I can't even remember them. But it's
Right.
like you come off of those kind of days and yeah, you need to come home and you just need to like either, I'm going to take my dogs for a walk. I want to ground myself again. And
Yes,
that grounding
decompress.
sometimes, yeah, sometimes that grounding and it can come with business. I mean, there's times when I'm working with podcasters and I'm working with multiple clients for podcasting, and we've got four episodes plus my two episodes to get up and running by Tuesday, and it's Friday, it's Monday night, and I've got to like, okay, shut the door, focus, put my music on, and then next thing you know, I got everything done. And then when
Right.
that's done, it's like, okay, tomorrow I need to just So
Yes, no, that's
yeah,
great. That leads me into my next question. And real quick, I wanted to back up. You had mentioned diet, right? And
yeah,
the gut health is so important. I mean, it's important
yeah,
for every human, but for an ADHD brain, like we need the protein,
yeah.
we need probiotics. Can you talk a little
I
bit?
need to be better on the probiotics. I do.
Yeah, well, we could all improve, but
Yeah.
could you talk, Kyle, a little bit about how you manage the ADHD? Like, I know you said one, you walk the dog to decompress, and do you do anything special for your diet? Are there any other strategies that have been effective for you as an adult managing
Yeah.
ADHD?
Well, see, I never feel like I'm managing my ADHD. I feel that I'm managing just myself. And it's not labeled as managing my ADHD. Although what I do probably helps my ADHD. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really go, okay, I'm doing this for my ADHD because it's one of those things where I'm also in the camp where, us first responders weren't trained properly to deal with our own self. We weren't
Mm-hmm.
trained to deal with the devastation that we see over time and the drips of water into our cup that eventually fill our cup over. Everybody's like, well, why are you so stressed? You trained for this. I'm sorry, we trained to save your life. We didn't train to deal with after not saving your life.
Right.
By accident or
Exactly.
for whatever reason, because you were too far gone or whatever, or that
Mm-hmm.
the accident was too bad and we couldn't. Like we didn't train, yes, it was spoke about very little that you're going to see this stuff, but there was never anything about why it affects us and all of that mental health stuff. Well, through the mental health work that I've done in the last year and a half, because I have my own mental health crisis after 20 years in the healthcare field,
Sure.
it was 20 years until I had a crash. So
Mm-hmm.
I had seen crazy stuff in the hospital setting, in the 911 setting, my own family. I mean, I'm the one that made the decision to not do life saving measures on my mother at 56 years old. I was the one that made that decision because I had the medical background and I knew that what her wishes were. Like
Mm-hmm.
those are huge pours into my cup, right? So
Right.
not, and not knowing how to deal with that stuff, they stacked. And it never really added up until many, many, many years later. And then once it did add up and I had my crash, I did, thank goodness, have the know-how to say, okay, I need help. And if you are in an ADHD situation or a mental health situation, or part of
Mm-hmm.
your ADHD is causing your mental health stuff to wait, don't be afraid to ask for help. There's tons of help out there now. You are one of them. You're
Yes.
doing great things. You can
Thank
get a lot of
you.
help by people like yourself and myself with the Elevate podcast for mental health and first responders. You can get help by knowing that other people are going through it. And then
Yes.
hearing like, oh, wait a second, diet's important for ADHD. Nobody ever told me that.
Right, right.
I heard that in Christina's podcast with Kyle Goodknight.
No, no.
So you have ways to go get help now, and it's at our fingers, literally at our fingertips, every step of the
Exactly.
way.
I,
And if we don't do that and we don't focus on ourselves, then we will never be able to help ourselves because that's really ultimately what helps us. I'm not a big fan of meds, although there are
mm-hmm.
probably times that they can maybe jumpstart the situation.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some extreme cases, and maybe you're on the spectrum more so than just ADHD, or there's
Right.
bipolarism going on or schizophrenia. I mean, whatever. So
Right,
you have
right.
to look at it as a whole. You do eventually have to get a professional opinion about these kind of these neurodivergent stuff. So
Right. No, absolutely. I love how you brought that up. Like, and there's no shame. Like you sharing your story is gonna like people listening, like that's gonna really, really help people open up and go get themselves help. I had the same type of situation during the pandemic where I went through my own mental health struggles. And I was a school counselor at the time, so it was like I felt like I was everybody's everything, like the
yeah.
parents
Oh
and the
yeah.
kids and
I've been
the
there.
staff. Yeah. And it's like I was pouring into everything and even my own family and their own issues, but I wasn't pouring into myself and I wasn't practicing what I preached. And one day I just broke out into hives and I was like, okay, my body's telling me that I really, really need to have a break. So I just, for anyone listening, please know that like, just like Kyle said, there really is help out there and don't be ashamed like at all. I mean, everyone, everyone has their own shit.
No
Everyone.
one, no one is perfect.
No
Period.
one. I love that you said that. I heard recently that holding ourselves to that standard of perfectionism is a form of self-abuse.
It is
So,
100%. That's literally one
yes,
of the things that I even learned more recently in the last 6 months. I learned because I have a people pleasing issue.
yes,
ADHDers also are people pleasers.
yep,
We don't want anybody to be disappointed because we feel we're disappointed in ourselves because we don't know how to figure things out yet. We also don't want to disappoint other people, and we are huge people pleasers, and that can be an issue at times. And
yes,
I've been through a course that people pleasing, self doubt, anxiety, all of that stuff is procrastination. Everybody, we could have a whole
yes,
episode about the
yes,
ADHD procrastination. Like,
yes,
I know now after going through this course and having my mentor who walked me through the process of our brain for procrastination and that people pleasing, that self doubt, or that self detriment, and how that leads to the anxiety that you may feel that comes up once in a while or comes up more often depending on how you deal with it. Procrastination is a huge sign and symptom of ADHD
yes,
because we put things off, and we never have, because we can get it all done because our brains can then function at a high level in a short period of time. And
yes,
then you think that you're what happened, at least with me, just to kind of clarify exactly what happened to me during this, is my anxiety would come from my procrastination, not because I was like pushing things off or not doing things. It was coming from, what if I didn't get this done? What would people think of me? People pleasing. So my people
yep,
pleasing procrastination led to my anxiety. I'm telling you right
yep,
now, I've had one acceleration into anxiety right before Christmas where I couldn't find a certain present. And I was out in the community, and my
mm-hmm,
wife was wanting me to find this. And it was for the birthday party that night. That was my daughter's. And my daughter's an adult. She would have totally understood that if I was like, man, I
right,
couldn't find it, but I started putting these false narratives onto myself. And if it wasn't for the fact that I knew where I was, and that I was starting having those funky feelings, because funky feelings will get you into those moments where your procrastination is now going to be a disappointment with someone else, but you're a people pleaser and you don't want to disappoint them, and how it's a crazy cycle and you spin down.
yes, it's a ripple
So
effect.
the tools
Mm-hmm,
and the tools and the techniques that were taught to me and explained to me over the 3 months that I took this course that I took, it was one of those things where I was able to go, okay, I'm in it. I'm in it. I'm
mm-hmm,
in it right now. What do I do? What are the tools? Okay. Okay. Am I really going to be? And then I was able to go through those tools and strategies. And by the time I got done with that day, I didn't like, normally it would be a lash out, right? It would normally be
right,
an argument or a mean text to my wife. Why are you putting this on me? Or whatever. It could be
right,
like somebody in my way on the road. It could have been a lash out. Well, because I
right,
was able to see where this was coming from, I was able to stay calm, be in a different place, do my breathing exercises, and my anxiety went from about a climbing to a 10 from an 8 when I was in the heat of it. It was an easy 8. I was starting to climb into the 9 and going towards 10. I felt I changed some things and some thought processes that I learned in this system, and I was able to make sure that I brought it back down to like a 4. Like,
that's
doesn't mean I
great.
don't have anxiety still, but I brought it back down, and I did it in real time and
Yes,
significantly faster than I'd ever done it before. And it was like, after, like, I had gone through some stuff during the process that I was able to utilize it and help myself. But this was the first time after I had essentially graduated from the system that I had to actually do it without being prompted or without help.
that's
And
amazing.
because I didn't lash out, and because I kept myself where I was, and I
Mm-hmm,
knew that I was in it, and I didn't want to be an 8, but I could be a 4 or a 3. I'm like, oh, I mean, that's just kind of where you're at when you're in the middle of a cardiac arrest. You're about a 4. It's not anxiety. It's like, okay, there's a little bit of, okay, making sure that everything gets done right. So
right,
when I did that, what happened magically is, one, I wasn't as on edge. I never lashed out at my wife. I never lashed out at the public when I was out in public and people were being stupid driving during the holidays.
right,
And what happened very, very shortly after that, I actually got a phone call from my wife and said, listen, you handled that situation way different than I've ever seen you handle a situation that you're
Oh,
in right now. And
it's
she goes, I
awesome.
appreciate it. And I'm sorry that I put you into this situation. Just go ahead and,
Wow.
go ahead and come on home. If you can't find it, not a big deal. We'll get through it. And that would be something where I would have demanded that answer from the argument that would have ensued, but that argument probably wouldn't have demanded that answer probably for, 20 hours. It would have just been an
Wow.
argument and she would have shut me,
Mm-hmm.
she would have given me the silent treatment, whatever. And she, or,
Right.
you're being an asshole, and it was one of those things where as soon as she said that, that people pleasing part was, wait a second, I did something for myself that someone else recognized that I handled it differently than I used to, and they were able to give me um, feedback on that and appreciate it. And it was just like
Yes.
instantly it went from that 4 down to a 0 within about a 15-20 minute period when I realized I was in it.
That's really, really amazing, Kyle.
Yeah.
A couple things you said made me think about, you were talking about procrastination in the brain and everything, and us ADHDers have lower dopamine
Mm-hmm.
historically. And so one of the things you were talking about, like, it makes so much sense. Like you get a rush when like these like crazy events are
Amazing.
happening in your
Yeah.
job,
And
right?
even
You're getting
fun
that,
stuff. Yeah.
right? We need that
Yeah.
stimulation. We need that
Yeah.
dopamine, right?
I'm not going to kid you right now. I'm a little bit of rush right now. I love talking about this stuff
Yes.
and talking with you about this because we've met each other a couple different times before. It's like, this is so easy to talk to you. And I beg and hope that this message gets to somebody out there that is struggling and they realize, wait a second, so somebody else has been through this and I can find help, that kind of thing.
Exactly. No, this is, I could talk to you all day about this. And then another thought I had was when your wife gave you that positive feedback, ADHD, I mean, everyone benefits, but people with ADHD need to be celebrated. Like
Yeah.
it's just, they need that celebration. And so
Yeah.
kudos to
And
your
it's not
wife.
stroking, yeah, and it's not stroking the ego. That's because
Right.
that
No,
was
no,
her.
no.
So that was her big thing when we faced our divorce 12 years into our marriage, 12 years ago. So
Hmm.
we're 25 years in May, this May. But
Wow.
12 years into our marriage, she was like, I'm done. I came home from work one day and I'm done. And through the 2 year process of reconciliation, she finally learned about how to deal with me. And I finally learned how to deal with her, not in a
Hmm.
bad way, but that 5 love languages, 5 apology languages, those are
Yes.
very, very important. She is an active service person. I
Hmm.
am, I'm a physical touch and what is it? What's the overarching one in the 5 apology languages or 5 love languages? That is words of affirmation. So it was, and that feeds
Hmm.
back to,
Yes.
then, and the word crazy cycle came from a book called The Boundaries that we read. And the crazy cycle is, let's just, role play. You and I are married. And it's like, well, I'm not going to tell you that I love you because you're not showing me respect, love and respect.
Hmm.
Now, for my wife and I, it's flip flop. She's more, she needs the respect and I need the love. But it doesn't
Yes.
matter which part of the couple is
Right.
which. It's the same
Hmm.
thing. There's a yin and a yang to almost every couple in the world, right? So,
Right.
because opposites do attract. So, if I'm not showing her respect, she's not showing me love. But if she's not showing me love, I'm not showing her respect. Crazy cycle.
Right.
And we can
Yes.
get into that same format when it comes to our ADHD and the things that cause us harm inside of our ADHD. If we don't communicate with our spouse or our loved ones or our child, I had to teach
Hmm.
my son as he got older, of course, age appropriately. As soon as my son got old enough to understand, and he's still in that early 20s, brain's not completely,
Right.
developed
Yeah.
yet. But
Hmm.
we've had to explain to him, hey, this love and respect, this yin and the yang, this respect and this love, this is all combined. And if you're in a crazy cycle, you can't get yourself out of crazy cycle until somebody says, listen, enough's enough. I'm going to show you love no matter what. And
Right.
I need you and you need to communicate. I need respect. So please just do the biggest thing that you can do for me is show me respect. And then
Yes.
therefore it knocks out the crazy cycle situation. So,
Right.
have I had issues over the last 12 years after we've had learned all this stuff? Yes. But the good news is that when she asked me for the divorce, I will tell you this right now. when she had, and this is kind of a tangent from the ADHD discussion, but it still kind of
No,
ties
it's
into it.
relevant.
It was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Wow.
It is the number one intellectual thing that ever happened to me. For her, on me coming home from 24 hours working on the medic, and her standing in my kitchen saying, "I'm done." Our kitchen,
Wow.
sorry. And I'm like, wait, what? Because that really was a wake up call to me. I
Hmm.
didn't realize that I wasn't, I mean, like somebody, do you respect your wife? Oh, hell yeah, I respect my wife. Was I respecting her in the way that she understood that I respected her? Maybe not. Was there
Hmm.
the acts of service? Was there procrastination by cleaning the house when she had a long day at the hospital? And all she
Hmm.
wanted to do was come home to a clean house, but I didn't do it until after she got home. And I'm like, oh, that's right. You meant to, that's right. I told you I cleaned the house. I'm going to do it now. Well, no, I just disrespected her because I told her I'd do it while she was at work and I didn't. That's just,
Right.
that's not, I'm not saying that she's not a, under my thumb type of thing, but it was one of those things where the respect in that situation is I told you I would do something and I kept my word, but my
Right.
procrastination and my ADHD kept me from it. So as long once we communicated that to one another, there was a little bit more of a understanding where, okay, I can show her respect by just having a conversation with her and talking about stuff that has to get done anyhow or needs to be
Right.
done for the family and just
Hmm.
sticking to it and getting it done. Now,
Right.
have I waited until 20 minutes before she got home and my cleaning or my whatever I told her I'd do could happen in 20 minutes? Hell yeah, but it still
But it
happened.
still happened. That's all that matters. And after 12 years of marriage, that's amazing. Like, she told you she wanted a divorce and like you guys tweaked your communication in just a few,
Huge.
which is so, so big with, I mean,
Communication's so big with ADHDers. I
yes.
mean, because once I communicated to her, and it wasn't me, it was our our counselor that
Hmm.
basically he could decide. I would say something in counseling, and she'd go, "What?" And he'd go, "What Kyle meant to say." Let me. It was almost like that, like
Right.
it's almost like that interpreter of I think what he was trying to say because I'm not the most eloquent at explaining my feelings back then. And he would like, hey Kyle, do you ever kind of more mean it like this? And I'm like, well, yeah, that's a much better way to put it than the way I just
Right.
put it. And he's like, okay, now, and so that whole process, 2 full years of, at first it was biweekly appointments
Hmm.
to learn how to communicate. And that's
Yeah.
another, I mean, ADHD couples, a couple with any ADHD are in it, if you're not doing some form of pre-marriage counseling that discusses the communication amongst
Yes.
an ADHD brain and she's an introvert and she's a type A introvert. So there's things that I know now that I didn't know before I said I do to her that if I would have known before I said I do to her, but you don't learn it until you realize some of the best learning is mistakes. So making
Right.
mistakes on both sides of the fence, but that communication, if there's another thing I tell people to do that are in a relationship that is two ADHDers or one ADHDer or
Hmm.
a big contrast in the personalities, find a professional, find a coach that's been there before, find someone that could say, hey, by the way, when this situation happens, this is a possibility where you're at, and this is a possibility where they're at, and have that open communication. That's huge. Communication is key. We
Yes,
stop we
communication.
stop communicating, it ruins everything.
Yeah, that's a non-negotiable. Need to know how to communicate
Yeah.
effectively. Which leads me into my last question. You kind of hit on this, Kyle, but um, what's one thing you wish people knew about ADHD or people with ADHD?
Um, that we do learn differently and we
Hmm.
approach the world differently. Like
Yes.
they need to know that everybody, like, I'm not going to approach the world the same way my wife does. She
Hmm.
is not ADHD whatsoever, not even close. But I don't approach the world the way she does. you know
Right.
and and that could be a personality thing, that could be the way she grew up, that's could be the way that I grew up, my family dynamics, her family dynamics. And so if
Right.
there's ever other people out there and they're struggling with a relationship of any sort, friends, I mean, I've had friends be like, Kyle, why are you like this? I'm like, I don't know, I'm just like this. You were mad as hell for a minute and now you act like there's nothing wrong, and I'm like, well, yeah, because I'm over it. I'm like, I said
Right.
my piece and I'm done, like, and
Right.
it's, you know,
No.
and it's like an instant shut off, and other people aren't like that. So just to know that there's just a different way that an ADHD brain approaches every single thing in life and
Right.
their life and the lives that they are part of.
Exactly, exactly. Going back to the Ferrari brain, for who's listening, if you didn't know we were talking about earlier when I referenced the Ferrari brain, a lot of times when I tell my clients that an ADHD brain is like a Ferrari brain with bicycle brakes. It is going a mile a minute and it's very, very hard to slow down.
Yeah. Yeah. When you told me that, I was like, oh my God, I've never had it. I mean, I'm 50 I know it's 52 still I'm almost 53. So we met only about 4 or 5 months ago. So yeah, the
Yeah.
first time you mentioned that, I'm like, okay, that's the first time I've ever heard that in 52 years. That's amazing. That makes so much sense.
Yes, absolutely. Oh my gosh, this has been amazing. Kyle, can you tell us where can people find you and what does it look like to work with you in the podcasting world?
Oh yeah. Well, of course, my name is Kyle Goodnight. You see it up there. As long as you spell it right, you're going to find me. Whether you go look on Google or Bing or wherever you search, do your searching. I'm the only Kyle Goodnight spelled the way that I do in the world that I've been able to find, and I've done a deep dive. There's another Kyle Goodnight without the K, and I've met him on Facebook once, and we've had a discussion. And I'm like,
Oh, wow.
how many times do people send messages to you? He's like, all the time, and I'm like, okay. I'm like, so just kylegoodnight.com or Google Kyle Goodnight. I do own Kyle Goodnight without the K.com. So I own both of those. So if someone
Okay.
does forget most it's a lifelong story of people forgetting the K in our name because they think it's good nighttime and it's good
Right.
knight in shining armor. So
Right.
um yeah, kylegoodnight.com. Of course, Christina will have all of my links in the bio. I've got a link tree that has everything to all my different podcasts. And what it's like to work with me in the podcasting world is hold on. No, it's just, because I can and I and I've and I know this. I can explain things because I am a Ferrari engine. I can
Right.
explain. I have to make sure. I have one client. He's like, okay, Kyle. So that last whole 5 minutes that you were explaining this to me, he's like, I got the first like 30 seconds. He's like, can we back up? I'm like, okay, so I need to slow down for him. Other people, I don't have to do that for. But
Right.
it's one of those things where I do my best to adapt to everybody's learning style.
Hmm.
And because of the Ferrari brain, I've also used to when I used to podcast and I was a producer for other people. I did things very, very archaically, and I didn't have the tools that I have now. And now the
Hmm.
tools that I have now, I've actually can shrink the time it takes to podcast into a nugget of a time and
Nice.
actually speed up someone's process because I have one client that and I think she's got a testimonial on my webpage. Basically what she said was she knew she wanted a podcast for her business,
Hmm.
but she felt that it was about a year away. Then she saw something on Facebook that she asked just a simple question to start doing early navigation of podcasting. I offered a one-on-one, explained to her my situation and my system, and I built that bridge that people talk about. What's
Hmm.
the fastest way to learn more things is find the bridge that someone has built over all the pitfalls. And
Right.
I have had all the pitfalls, and now I have that bridge. So that bridge now, when people confide in me and want to utilize my services or learn about what I know and teach them, I sped her podcasting, choice up an entire year in her business,
Wow.
and
That's
she's already at
amazing.
15 episodes.
That's
So
amazing.
yeah, and I think she's starting her third month with me.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
Well, anyone listening, if you want to start a podcast, find Kyle. I will drop his links. This has been an amazing conversation, and I know that we'll be chatting again.
absolutely.
So thank you so much for being here, Kyle.
Sure thing. Thanks, Christina. Bye bye.